Good morning. Welcome to my class. Today I'll be talking about a very important character in Shakespeare's tragic play Macbeth. The character which I am going to talk about is Lady Macbeth, and in the course of this lecture I'll try to analyze her character and how her character had contributed to this particular tragic play. Okay, so this drama Macbeth is from BA Part 2, Paper 3, and this is very important for the curriculum. So, without much delay, let us begin. Now, Lady Macbeth is one of the most important creations by Shakespeare. She had a definite role to play in the development of the drama or the tragedy Macbeth. It will be unfair on the part of a reader to judge the character and role of Lady Macbeth by her outward appearance. A close scrutiny of her character will indeed establish her as one of the most sublime tragic heroines of Shakespeare. Much of her behavior in this particular play seems to be pretended and meant to bluster the drooping spirit of her husband. She only acts as the guiding force to her weak husband and helps in giving intensity and completeness to the tragedy. In reality, she is not a cruel monster but a human being with a natural tenderness of a woman. So, in this course of the lecture, we'll try to analyze uh, the various aspects of her character and the role she played and the role played by her in the course of the play. Okay, so in the first half of the play, Lady Macbeth exerts the ultimate deciding influence on the action. In her first action, in the first appearance, we find her reading her husband's letter, which was being sent while Macbeth came to know about the witch's prophecy. So she was actually reading her husband's letter, which informs her that the witch's prophecies that Macbeth will become the king of Scotland. She at once resolves to pursue her husband to attain kingship by murdering Duncan. So she talks about the regicide, but she is aware that though her husband is not devoid of ambition, he lacks uh, the illness which should attend. He lacks the kind of spirit to do the job. So she is not devoid of ambition. She knows her husband's weakness, how he scruples to catch the nearest way to the object of desire. So she sets herself without a trace of doubt or conflict to counteract with this kind of weakness. To her, there is no separation between will and deed. And so, when the messenger brings her the news of King's impending visit to her place, the Inverness, she decides she decides that it will be the fatal entrance of Duncan. force of mask her bold, resolute, and cruel. She invokes the evil spirit inside her. She even says in the play it's mentioned, "Come, you spirit that tend on moral thoughts, unsex me not, unsex me here." And she actually prays to them. She actually prays to the evil spirit uh, to replace the milk in her breast with poison. So, on one hand, we can see her motherly nature as if she is going to milk her baby, but she also wants her milk to be replaced by poison. She talks the vital decision of murdering Duncan without consulting that with her husband, which also establishes her dominance over her husband. Now, let us talk about the planning. How did they committed the regicide? How did they kill? They plan to kill the king. As soon as Macbeth arrives, Lady Macbeth goes straight into the business and significantly greeting him. She actually greets him as one greater than both Glamis and Corder. She actually greets him as the King of Scotland. She tells him about her plan of the regicide and animates him by picturing the deed as heroic. He calls it this night's great business. She rouses Macbeth with her talent. She even calls him coward, which no soldier can bear. But Macbeth, who also has a strong conscience, is yet to decide on some kind of future action. So Macbeth was very much undecided because he was not sure. Duncan was a fatherly figure to him. Macbeth was very much unsure of the proposal led by Lady Macbeth. But Lady Macbeth cannot let the matter rest here. She scolds him, reproves him, and with much ease brings him back to to her original plan. To tempt Macbeth into action, she outlines the evidently foolproof plan she had chalked out. Her plan of laying the guilt upon the Chamberlain is invented on the span of moment as simply to satisfy her husband. The practicality of her scheme and her reproaches drives away Macbeth's scruples. He at last cannot help agreeing to her plan. So he says, "I am settled," and bend up each corporal agent to this terrible feat. Thus, Lady Macbeth's influence upon her husband plays a crucial role in developing the main action of the play. It is also true that thought of murdering Duncan initially comes to Macbeth's mind from his meeting with the witches as well. But without Lady Macbeth's integration, the thought might probably never have been transformed into action. So, just so the entire planning of the murder of Duncan was been chalked out by Lady Macbeth. Okay, so we have many other more features in Lady Macbeth's characters. For example, Lady Macbeth is also very much capable of tremendous self control and practicality when it comes to meeting the crisis. So, she was able to manage the crisis of the life very well. After the regicide, when Macbeth, in excitement, forgets to leave the bloody dagger and also forgets to wash the blood stain from his hand. She instructs him. She instructs him to keep the dagger in Duncan's chamber and to wash the blood, the filthy witnesses. As she hears the knocking at the door, she does not lose her cool, but can see the pressing needs for quick positive action. So immediately after the murder of Duncan, there was a knocking in the gate, and she was very much composed upon hearing the knocking. She instructs her husband to put on his nightgown and tells him, "Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts." She pretends ignorance of the regicide, and after its discovery, her fainting, she actually got fainted, and her fainting seems only too natural in the eyes of the others. She also displays the utmost resourcefulness and alertness of brain at the banquet scene when she tries various methods for restoring Macbeth's mental balance and composure. So, in banquet scene, Macbeth was visibly traumatized by seeing the ghost of Banquo. But Lady Macbeth single handedly tried to regain the composure lost by Macbeth. She tries to save her husband in the awkward situation by inventing an illness for her husband's, by discouraging the guests from talking to him, and finally by bringing the banquet to an abrupt, hurried end. She actually tells the guests that Macbeth, the king, the current king, who has actually seen the ghost of Banquo, is very much unwell, and she abruptly ends the banquet. Her well composed behavior is admired by Macbeth, and he eventually asks her how she keeps her natural ruby of her cheek watching such sight. So it's a kind of praising on part of Macbeth, and he actually very much praises his wife, the way she keeps the composure even after such a horrible massacre, such a heinous crime of regicide. Okay, so but after this, after the act, after the banquet scene, the there is a steady decline of Lady Macbeth's character on the course of the time. So the main role of Lady Macbeth in the play Macbeth is to keep her influence on her husband. I mean, throughout the play, she was very much influential on her husband. However, it begins to decline steadily after the regicide and most prominently after the banquet scene. Macbeth has started, Macbeth has began to lose confidence in her wife's wisdom, and so does not care to consult her while planning the murder of Banquo and Fleance. After the disclosure of murder of Duncan, her nature begins to sink as well. So it is evident in the discovery scene of Duncan's murder when she faints. People used to think that she faints out of compassion of the old king, but actually what happens? He faints out of the guilt of her conscience. Okay, so when we next see her as the Queen of Scotland, the glory of her dream has faded. She enters to some kind of disillusionment. She enters disillusioned and weary with want of sleep. She was lacking sleep because the guilt was not letting her sleep. To her, the thing is like, as Shakespeare says, not had all spent. Her husband's was physically stronger. He was flowing with life, and her husband came to the foreground, and she returns. And though her will remains, though she does not does her best to help him, he really needs her. So there is a kind of distancing between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth immediately after the regicide. So the husband no more needs the wife here. The gulf between husband and wife starts to become widening. It widens at a very rapid pace, and while Macbeth degenerates into a butcher, Lady Macbeth is overcome by a sense of guilt, as I have already told, and becomes a nervous wreck. So she has undergone a very severe nervous breakdown. Their isolation from each other goes to such an extent that when Macbeth receives the news of her death, his immediate response is, she should have died hereafter. So, now let us discuss the most prominent drama presence of Macbeth in this particular play, that is the sleepwalking scene. The sleepwalking scene is the last stage appearance of Lady Macbeth. The scene brings out the crisis of conscience that shakes the tremendous soul of Lady Macbeth. In this scene, her changed mind reaches its apex when the audience finds her as a desolate and stricken woman recapitulating the crimes as she speaks while walking in sleep. So she actually walks in her sleep, and in her sleeping mode, she talks about her conscience, her guilt ridden conscience. Here we observe a total bankruptcy of Lady Macbeth's mental and physical condition, as the terrible memories of the crime go deep into her soul and sucks her energy, and also peace of mind and her very life. After this scene, we no more see her on stage and come to know about that she had killed herself, she had committed suicide. So the beauty of this particular scene, it expresses the innermost conscience of Lady Macbeth, and how her conscience comes out through her guilt-ridden sleepwalk while she confesses her crime. There are certain times when she talks about she was rubbing her hand, and she tries to overpower the smell of the blood which she thinks is on her hand. She often says, "Oh, all the perfumes of Arabia may not sweeten thy little hand. Oh, oh, oh." So she thinks all the perfumes of Arabia cannot overshadow the smell of the blood of Duncan. She tries to rub her hand as if she is washing her hand again and again, despite there was no blood, visible blood on her hand. Okay, so let us look back to the findings of her character. Shakespeare creates Lady Macbeth in such a way that she seems to be a ruthless monster who would go to an extremes and use all possible means to achieve her goals. Her iron will and ruthless determination makes her look very much fiend like, very evil. And many critics, there are many Shakespearean critics who consider her as the fourth witch. I mean, the three witches actually talks about Macbeth will become the king, but it was her, the fourth witch, who actually instigates Macbeth to commit the regicide. So many of the Shakespearean critics have considered her as the fourth witch in this particular play, who instigates her husband to murder the old king, who was actually very much kind and gentle, and their guest for the night. But if we see it from the other dimension, we can see that considering her essential femininity and women like tenderness, it will be very much unfair to call Lady Macbeth as a fourth witch. Okay, so she has some kind of womanly feeling which is revealed when she says, "Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it." So, like, there was a scene when Macbeth went inside Duncan's chamber while Duncan was sleeping peacefully uh, in his sleep. So, Duncan sleeping peacefully, and Lady Macbeth went inside to check her whether he has slept or not. And after coming, but that time she had the opportunity to kill Duncan. But after coming back from the chamber without doing anything, she tells Macbeth that had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. There are other statements by Lady Macbeth which enables us to understand that outside her dark, ambitious character who wants to become the king or queen of Scotland, she had some kind of very soft corner inside her mindset, and she often consider herself as a mother, soft-hearted mother, when she says, "I know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me." So, and also her gradual breakdown also showcases that she is not devoid of any human feeling, unlike those witches who had no human feeling and who does many supernatural things like dancing around the lightning cauldron and making certain prophecies which actually becomes true. So those witches has made prophecy that no man out of women's womb should kill Macbeth. But incidentally, what happened that MacDonald was untimely ripped off from her mother's tomb. He was a cesarean baby. So in that way, he has satisfied the prophecies, and they have also prophesied that Macbeth will not be killed by his enemies until and unless Burnham Wood comes to Dunsian. So what actually happens? The wood never came to Dunsian. The soldiers carrying the trees to cover themselves came to Dunsian, and it looks like as if the forest is actually coming back to Dunsian. So all these kind of supernatural activities made by the witches are so much different from the action as described by Lady Macbeth. So, from this perspective, it will be very unjust to call Lady Macbeth as the fourth witch. So, Lady Macbeth is undoubtedly the most fascinating female character of Shakespeare. In spite of all her crimes and and some kind of uh, action what she commits, the readers cannot help pitying her due to her ultimate sufferings and the premature death. However, considering the role played by her and the inevitable consequences she played, we may conclude that she would have given the world to undo what she had done. And the famous historian A.C. Bradley concludes her character with this: she was too great to repent. Thank you.